Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode where we're here bringing a professional in the sustainability industry, trying to shed more light on what it is that they do so you guys can figure out if this is something that you want to do. So today we have my colleague Karan, who is also my roommate. And he also works in the nonprofit sector. And so, hey, Karan, can you introduce yourself a bit and maybe just share a little bit about what you do for your work?
Yeah, it's funny we're roommates. We're like 50 miles apart right now. We could have just done this in the same room, but we're doing this way. Whatever.
Whatever.
I'm kidding. Hey everyone, I'm Karan. I work at a nonprofit research institute as a clean energy transition analyst, where we basically advise state governments on policy regarding clean energy transition, environmental justice, and so on. So moving forward to meet state climate goals, things like that. So we advise not just California, but other states as well. So that's what I do. And yeah, happy to be on, Tyanna.
Oh, that's cool. I feel like every time when you come home and you tell me about a new project, it's always so great because it's dealing with future policy that might be put in place in our country. So thank you. Applaud you. So what does a typical day typically look like in a role that you have?
Yeah, so in my role specifically, I mean, it's like a 9 to 5 job, which really means sometimes it's 9 to 5 and sometimes it's 8 to 8, depending on deadlines and things like that. In my role, I kind of balance both like more quantitative, like data science side of things, but also like put on my like communications hat, writer's hat, things like that. So I do a lot of data analysis, a lot of number crunching, a lot of math in R, Excel, Tableau, even just pen and paper, just writing stuff out regarding like power plant pollution and like health impacts that might cause, or air pollution patterns in like nearby communities like Richmond, California, which is a city just maybe like 20 minutes from here in Oakland, that has a lot of like like heavy pollution activity going on. And also, as a researcher, you have to write up your findings in a whole bunch of different ways. So that goes from like blog posts, which are more casual, like, you can send it to your parents and they can like read along and be like, oh, that's cool, to like, actual research papers and policy briefs and things like that. So typical day, yeah, it just depends on what's due. I work on like 4 or 5 different projects at any given time, and there's always a deadline coming up. So yeah, a lot of screen time, a lot of numbers, but it's really cool because it's like literally seeing like, oh, look, this power plant emits this much pollution, like this many tons of pollution that can cause this many mortalities. I mean, it's really dark, but you could actually give that number then to a policymaker and like they can listen to that, like, oh, that's crazy. Like we should do something about this. So yeah, it feels like you're actually doing something.
No, you're doing a lot, not just something. You're saving lives potentially.
Trying to, potentially, hypothetically.
And when you were explaining your day to day, you mentioned R and Tableau. For some people out there who don't know what that is, can you maybe give a little blurb of what it is and how
Yeah,
it is that someone can learn it?
of course. Yeah. So R is basically another programming language. It's more useful for like statistics and things like that. So, other languages that you could use instead of like Python. I'm sure people have probably heard of Python or C++. I think less people use that compared to Python, but R is just another one of these, like it's open source, so it's free, like anyone can download it. I personally learned R in undergrad and grad school. But there's a lot of like boot camps and things like that online you can do. And its main goal, you can do a lot of data wrangling. If you have like these huge data sets, you can use R to like break them down and do a lot of statistical analysis on them. But it's pretty flexible. Like you can do a whole lot of things in it, like even make maps and videos. It starts getting kind of crazy. Yeah, so that's our Tableau. It's more targeted towards like making really pretty graphics. So if you're ever like online and maybe it's like a research agency's website or something, and there's like a really pretty interactive graphic showing like something depressing, like sea ice levels reducing, or carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, or things like that. But it's this really cool graphic. it might have been made in Tableau. So Tableau's whole purpose is you can input a bunch of data in, data sets, kind of join them together, and then you can kind of play with the data and make like really cool graphics that are interactive too. So you can put on a website and like anyone reading this article can like interact with this like map that you made or like any other kind of graphic and kind of understand the data. So yeah, I learned Tableau just at work, like at this job. I had no idea how to use it before. And just at my job, I had to learn it. So yeah.
And I just want to echo Tableau and R. I feel like those are two pretty big hard skills that someone who wants to be in a role similar to yours or like a science research person, I feel like it's pretty important. Even in the role that I have currently, though it's more like manager role at a corporation, it's like a lot of what I do is still kind of sciencey. And so what I'm doing right now is learning Tableau a lot on my own. And maybe this is what you did too, but YouTube is the best.
YouTube is great for Tableau. If you know someone who knows it, that's great because sometimes you can. I remember the first 2 weeks of my job, I started to learn Tableau. The learning curve is pretty steep, I will say. But once you figure it out, it's like the easiest thing ever. Some things like R, it's like a pretty steady learning curve, you know, like it stays consistent and like basically gets harder the harder the thing you're trying to do is. But then Tableau is like really hard at first. Not even hard, just annoying at first. And then like one little thing, like I had to ask my boss, like, hey, I give up. I don't know how to do this. And she's like, oh, just drag this here. And that was it. You know, I spent 2 weeks on this and that was it. So like now I know how to do it. And it takes 30 seconds to make these crazy cool maps now. So.
No, that's awesome. With what you do, what would you say some other soft skills and hard skills would be pretty essential?
Honestly, just being a good team player. Like I guess it kind of ties into communications, but like no one's like lone wolfing it out here. Like it takes a village, and my group is pretty small, but even so, there's a lot of teamwork. Like I'm learning a lot from my coworkers. I try to help out, you know, teach my coworkers things that they might not know. You know, it's very collaborative. Just being just a decent person, and having a sense of humor. I think, especially when like everyone's working 12 hours a day, things are crazy, deadlines are coming up, everything's on fire. Just having like a sense of humor, I think, just be a good person. I know that sounds like some kind of kindergartner lesson, but like it's true. Like that's the reason. That's the first thing they teach you in kindergarten is, hey, be a nice person, is because you have to be, and you know you got to keep spirits up, keep the team bond strong, so you can get the job done.
And the thing is, I feel like people think you have to have all these hard skills in order to be a successful candidate for a role. And yes, they are important, but echoing what you're saying, the most important thing is having a personality, being a person, caring about other people, showing that you can be a team player, picking up the slack when other people are way too busy. Like those are, I feel, are the biggest components. And when you do incorporate that type of narrative, especially during the interview process, I feel like it really does make a difference from what other people might want to mention in their interviews. And
also kind of tying these two things together, like at my job, like everyone has different skills. Like some people are good at Python, some people are good in Excel, some people are really good at writing, some people can use Tableau, but they don't really know how to use R, you know, all these kinds of things. So like, you know, if someone is doing something in Tableau, but they don't know how to do it in R, but R is better at a certain task, you know, then I can jump in, hey, I know how to do that in R, and I can do it with more detail, with more accuracy in R. So then, you know, that gap gets filled in, right? Someone else, or like Tableau, hey, I can make the graph look prettier. You made it in R, it looks kind of ugly, no offense. I could do this in Tableau, check this out, you know, and like everyone kind of works together. Or Python has its own advantages. So you don't have to know everything, like Tyanna said. You don't have to come in knowing Python, no R, no Tableau, no Excel. If you know a couple of those things and you're also a great team player, you know how like those skills kind of fit in this like puzzle that is this company you're applying for. Like that's the most important thing. And
we can talk about skills all day, honestly.
Yeah, we're just so talented.
I know, we're just such great communicators. We just want to keep sharing. But
I'm hilarious.
Yes, you are hilarious. Jumping back out a little bit. So I know the industry that you're in is in the nonprofit sector, and in your past, you were in the corporate space. And so I'd like to know a little bit more about why it is that you jumped from corporate to nonprofit and how are you liking it and what challenges and good things are you seeing?
Yeah, originally I worked in corporate because I thought that, hey, these guys have a ton of money, put simply, and what if you can make the case for them to use that money in a more responsible way? For instance, um, if they could spend a lot of money on selling a bunch of solar panels, to power their operations, that's great because they're reducing their carbon footprint. They have a lot of money to do that. So instead of, like one house puts up like a 5 kilowatt system, but a company can put up like something thousands of times larger than that, So like, and I started off doing that. So I would basically, it was like a very like business bro, like financial, just cut and dry, like, hey, if the solar system is going to cost $5 million now, but it's going to net you like $7 million over the next 10 years, boom. Oh, of course, that makes financial sense. We'll do it, and it's like cut and dry. And then I worked at other companies that were more public, that they also cared about their image more. Like this first company I worked at was privately held. They were like a manufacturing firm. So yeah, it was very cold calculus. Does it make financial sense? Then yes, we'll do it, which was great in some ways, but also in other ways, it's kind of like, it just felt cold, but whatever, gets the job done. But then like I moved into more like public types of companies that like everyone knows. And then it felt, at least I know you are at a company right now that's very public, Tyanna, so I don't want to talk too much shit, but at this particular job, I just felt like what we were doing we could be doing so much more. It felt like more going for the low hanging fruit that doesn't actually do that much, but looks cool on a headline, that this company can announce, oh, look at us, we're doing the sustainable thing. We're so responsible. We're such a good company. But it felt like, you're not really doing that much as much as you could be doing if you proclaim to care about these issues to the extent that you are. So I kind of got a little disillusioned by it. Everything had to have a profit motive, things like that. So then I kind of moved into the nonprofit space because it felt like the people that were actually doing this, like, yeah, like, because this is the fight and you kind of giving everything you can give into this, and at the same time having impact, you're going for the people at the top, the policymakers who can actually make a long-term difference if you can make a convincing enough argument. And for them, sometimes it's not as strictly like, oh, it's saving money, sometimes it is, but there are other, hey, people are dying from these coal plants, like this many people a year that are dying from this one coal plant and there's 3 of them. So maybe we should think about like phasing that out, using something else. It feels a lot more like we're helping people directly.
Yeah. And I think it would be interesting for you to share a little bit more on how a nonprofit research institution can help drive policy and change, because before you entered this role, I actually didn't realize that they had that much impact. But I think it'd be really cool to hear how this type of nonprofit can really make change, especially here.
Yeah, I would just like to clarify, there's like in this space, like sustainability, climate change, whatever, there's kind of like 2 types of nonprofits. There's like the more activist side of things that you might have heard, like Sierra Club, nonprofits like that. They'll be the ones you'll see like protesting events and things like that. There's a pipeline, they'll send some guys out there to protest or, kind of register people to vote, things like that. And then there's more like science types of nonprofits that are focused more on like research. Like these people could have been professors at universities, but they didn't want to go into academia. That's a lot of the people I work with. They're all like PhD researchers, doctor, or whatever. So, and on that side of things, that's where we stray away from the activism role, from like beating the drums, like everyone, get out to vote, such and such happened and look at this headline, look at who this guy did that. Like, we need to get out to vote. We need to do this. We need to protest that. We don't really get involved with any of that. It's more so our reputation is built on being scientists, being researchers, and like, that's where the trust builds between us and community groups, between us and policymakers, utility companies, other scientists, things like that. right? So, we work closely with other researchers at like UC Berkeley, for instance, at least me personally. And then state state researchers at like California Air Resources Board, things like that. So we have built this reputation. Of course, it takes a long time to get there as more impartial researchers that, we set out to examine this, and these are our findings, and here are our recommendations based on these findings. Those are the two kind of lanes that there are.
Yeah, and I'm glad you explained that, because I think when people hear nonprofit, especially in our space, they just think activism, like Greenpeace, kill the corporations, like whatever. And so I'm glad you're able to share that. And so within the type of role that you have, do you think this is something that people out of college can get into? And if so, what types of skills would they need? I know we already touched on some, but maybe some experiences, or what can they do while in college to make them a strong candidate in this role?
Yeah. So my job in particular, I will say it's a lot more like people who I feel like at the lower tier with just a master's degree, like almost everyone has a PhD, but we have hired some people with just like undergrad degrees like BS or BA. And then of course you have like interns every summer as well. I think in terms of skills, a lot of like data analysis skills, at least for my type of role in particular, if you're interested in this kind of field, a lot of data science or data analysis type of skills, like statistics. You don't have to go super hard into statistics, like where you're doing like graduate level theory, but like just knowing how to calculate like T-scores or mean, median, mode, that type of stuff, that kind of goes a long way, and actually being able to use that in a context that like a real world context, So if you can get involved with projects, like if you're an undergrad, so if you have a senior thesis or a senior project or something like that, maybe if you can steer it into a more like data analysis type of thing where you're collecting data or you're pulling data from online repositories, like government websites like NOAA has a lot of data around atmospheric science and ocean data, try to learn some R or Python. Python especially, there's a lot of tutorials online if you can't take a class for it at your university. Yeah, and Excel. Excel is very important, I would say. You can do a lot in just Excel, and it's a little more, I would say it feels a little more straightforward than code, although it can be annoying in its own way. So yeah, just getting started so you have something on your resume to show like, look, I've actually conducted like real world like research. Like, I want to look at, let's say, like cancer rates in this population that's adjacent to this series of like oil refineries in Louisiana, or, I just totally made that up. But yeah, like you can kind of pull data like that, and maybe in your free time if you want to do that. But I know that's kind of really hard to do in your free time, especially if you're strapped to school and jobs and things like that. So,
and I just want to say something about senior theses and everything, because I was told recently that at the school that you went to, UCLA, you guys were required to do a senior thesis. Right?
Yes, for my major, we were required to do a senior thesis. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like at my school, that wasn't the case for me, even though we're in the same major. And so for people out there who are wanting to do a senior thesis but don't really know how to start off, I would start by talking to some professors that you build really close connections to, and just sharing with them that you want to do a thesis on this certain topic, and they can most likely point you into the right direction of someone in the department, or maybe in a different department, who is more strong-headed in that subject. And so really, professors look scary, but they're not scary. They really just want to help you sometimes.
Yeah, and if you can get like an undergraduate research position or research assistant position, that's pretty big, You might not be doing like super technical stuff, but like it's something to put on your resume, and you can pick up skills from grad students you're working with, or the PI themselves, like things like that, especially if you're not required to do a senior thesis.
Mm-hmm. And so I know we've been talking about the nonprofit field a bit, and so I'd love to hear some of your insights so far of what you learned throughout these last couple of years that you've been working in the nonprofit space. specifically with clean energy, because that's what you focus in?
There's just so much going on. It's a big world out there, and there's just so much in terms of policy, in terms like there's so many players between policymakers, state agencies, local agencies, universities, companies, community groups. And earlier I made it seem like I'm like almost like maligning activist type groups, and I'm not trying to do that. Like there are like a lot of critical, like environmental justice groups that we work with, that they're amazing. They're on the ground and they're raising awareness for health issues that are happening in the community. So yeah, there's just so much happening. But at the same time, this is like, we're at this like crux point with climate change where people are now, it's no longer a debate. You know, maybe like 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, it was like a debate, you know, CNN, they'd have like a climate change advocate or a scientist or whatever, like Bill Nye of all people, and then like a climate change denier. And because they were put side by side, that kind of implies that they're both on the same level, like in terms of like their knowledge and experience, which is not true, you know? But now it's like something like 70 to 80% of Americans know this is happening and are concerned about it. We're seeing it happen. We're seeing the impacts, we're seeing the hurricanes, we're seeing the wildfires, the droughts. Look at Europe, like thousands of people just died in the heat wave a couple of weeks ago. Like this stuff is happening, right? And to that end, policymakers are waking up, you know, like the players who can actually make a change are waking up, and they are actually looking for people to advise them. Cause like what do we do? Like this is happening, but like what the heck's going on? There's no water, there's fires are burning. So that's where like, you know, us experts, it feels weird saying us experts, but yeah, like us experts come in, like we can advise, like this is how to best navigate this. And yeah, these impacts are going to happen, but to avoid them getting worse, here's what we have to do now, you know, decarbonize this much by 2030, this much by 2050, and so on. I don't know if that answered the question, but this field is changing rapidly, and we are getting a lot of support now from the top. And speaking of that, like, you know, they just passed this big climate change bill at the federal level, which is the biggest investment in climate change the US has ever done. Mm-hmm. That's huge, you know, and a lot of that is like directly tied into a lot of work I'm doing, like making energy more affordable for regular folks, like regular households, like especially lower income communities as well, through energy efficiency, through renewable energy, so on and so forth. So this very much impacts my job, the work we do, and it makes things a lot easier, but also like we can push a lot harder now.
Thanks, Karan. No, that was really great. I know we're kind of at time now. And so any last words of wisdom that you have for anyone out there really looking to be in the clean energy space?
Yeah. So to that end, what I just said, like you know, there's a lot more support for this, which means that there's a lot more types of roles available. You know, I'm going to sound like a boomer, but when I was coming up, which wasn't that long, like 10 years ago, like there wasn't that much. When you said I was interested in environmental science, everyone thought of you as a tree hugger, barefoot hippie walking around in the dirt, you know, like that kind of stuff. Like, what are you going to do? Like just recycle as a job, you know? Now perception has changed, right? Now companies from the very top, you know, like Disney, they're acknowledging this is huge. So they need everyone they can get, from data scientists like me to communicators, you know, and people who understand policy, especially corporations need people like that as well. Just like everything, you know, business, like people on like more MBA business side of things, but you can make like climate investments or energy investments, things like that. That's a growing field now, and it's kind of blowing up. So there's just so much you can do. You don't have to strictly go into like, I want to be a clean energy scientist or clean energy researcher. You can go in getting like an MBA. You can be like a businessman, but focus on sustainability or clean energy.
Yeah. So where can people find you?
Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just Karan Shetty, although there's a million people with that name, but it's the guy who looks like this. But also if you're interested in learning more about like just current events in the environmental world, like I do run a podcast with a couple of buddies of mine called Greenhouse SaaS. We kind of break down the latest environmental headlines, but in a more casual, kind of like this, casual, like kind of snarky tone. You know, if you're kind of tired of the doom and gloom, reading New York Times or whatever, like everyone's going to die. Like we're kind of counteracting that a little bit, and while also kind of keep it to the facts. So check us out. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, whatever, as Greenhouse SaaS. And I'm assuming Tyanna will put the links down below. So yeah. Thanks, Tyanna.
Well, thanks so much, Karan. And I hope you guys learned something out there. If you want to contact him, I'll put his contact info in the description below. But thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Tyanna. Good luck, everyone.